downtown Hot Springs, Arkansas. And this is our first History After Hours podcast for 2019. And we have a lot of students staring at us blankly right now, waiting for this to be over so they can get their participation points and go home. But with us today, we have Mr. Ron Franklin, Doctor, man. I only wish.
It's not me. That's
the PhD.
Someday. You'll
Christopher Thrasher and Mr. Keith Todd. We're all going to be chiming in. So,
don't cut ourselves short now. We all three have master's degrees. So, if he's going to be a doctor, then we need to call master, right?
Okay, yeah. Let's come up with titles of nobility right now.
Come on. We need a little bit of notoriety here.
Okay, so we're going to start the podcast, which means since it's a live podcast, we have question and answer. And the students are now fighting their way up to the front to ask a question or to give us a topic to talk about. Here they come. Here we go.
Stampede. Oh, be careful.
All right, hang on just a second while I give you this mic. Or I'll just point it at you. Say your name.
Karsten Phillips.
And what's your question?
So, I know this is random, but if there was a single person that had the most influence in pop culture, who would it be?
Currently?
Just ever.
Well, pop culture. Let's go post-World War II American pop culture, just to narrow it down a little. Beethoven. What do you got?
I immediately go to Michael Jackson.
Elvis Presley?
Hendrix. I think Elvis Presley is the correct answer.
Survey says Elvis Presley. All right. 2 out of 4 can't be wrong, right? It's hard to tell, though. What about today, 2019? Who currently has the most influence on pop culture?
Donald Trump.
Ooh.
That's a good answer.
Yeah, that is a good answer.
It is a good answer.
Yeah.
It's hard to argue with.
I mean, I know he's president, but he is sort of a pop cultural icon as well, right? Reality star, media mogul, university creator, destroyer, I don't know.
You know, as much as I hate to say it, I've got to throw the Kardashians in the ring there. I mean, given that she was instrumental in getting that pardon the other day.
No, you're wrong. It's the egg.
Okay, you're
Remember? Did you see all that when she got replaced by the egg?
the most liked photo ever. You're absolutely right.
The king of all media, the egg.
Okay, so who's next? Somebody else come up, give us a topic or question? Not everybody at once.
Breathing room is what we've got here. Oh, here we go. Volunteer.
Okay, state your name.
Jordan Lyle.
And what is your question?
During the French Revolution, after they rebelled against the monarchy, why didn't they immediately establish a constitution instead of having the cleansing happen, like in the radical era?
Well, let's think that through. They had a constitution that eliminated the king. That was the Constitution of 1792. But they were carried away with their own idea that they needed to preserve what they'd built, right? Now that we've gotten the king out of the way, and they can execute him because he's no longer a king, now we can go through and purge the rest of the system so that everybody lines up behind the new system. It's a way to, if you eliminate all of your enemies, then you have 100% support, which is, an evil way to go about that, but it's still a way to do it.
Okay, very good.
Yep.
Who's next?
The cleansing. The purge is real. I don't know if you guys realize that, right? Just go back and read some things. It happens.
Okay, state your name.
Ben Muldoon.
And what is your question?
How do y'all think the State of the Union went?
So, loaded question number 1 of the night. You know what? I think there were a lot of surprises, and I think a lot of the surprises were for the left. I think everybody expected Donald Trump to be Donald Trump, and they didn't get that. They got a polished, practiced State of the Union speech, a State of the Union address that had a lot of things directed at them, almost as daring them not to clap for a lot of the things. So he did a fantastic job. They were, from my perspective, there were 3 cringe moments of the night. One is Nancy Pelosi's petty clap, where she leans into his ear and kind of gives it to him a little bit. So that was pretty petty. I would call down my 9th graders for doing that, and she's Speaker of the House of Representatives. So what do I know?
Third in line to the presidency.
There you go. But also his seemingly suggesting that we should start another arms race if the withdrawal from the INF treaty doesn't go well, which was dangerous. And then, of course, his call that, hey, we got to end all these investigations. Congress, don't do your constitutional duty. So those three moments went, make you hiss a little bit. But otherwise, I think it went really, really well.
Any other opinions on the State of the Union?
What's your opinion on his socialism comment? Because that's getting a lot of attention right now. Because it was directed at people like Sanders and Ocasio-Cortez and some others that maybe...
Looked like Sanders wanted to crawl under the chair.
He was melting, looked like. No, I mean,
Which he's been slowly melting for 30 years.
Yeah. How old is that guy?
Eventually we won't be able to see his
No,
face.
well, all right, well, think about this. The word socialism has an automatic stigma. It's been stigmatized in this country specifically because we've watched countries like the Soviet Union fall apart, and then we've seen Cuba go through socialist programs. So when he says that word, this is important for you guys to understand. When the president says the word socialism, he's referring specifically to the type of socialism where the government itself takes over all of the industry, which is shown to be a failed plan. But what people mistakenly think he's also implying when he's saying this is all social programming, social safety nets, and that is not the same thing. Like, we have socialist programming in this country. If you don't understand that, then you just aren't well read. We have public schools. We have first responders. We have, right? All of those things are there for you. We have public libraries. We pay taxes, and those things come back to you in the form of services. That's socialism, because you didn't ask to pay those taxes. You didn't agree to have things raised up. They're just taken from you and then applied to however they need them. So let's be able to separate the two ideas. Socialism, as far as a national movement to take over industry and then try to moderate what workers can and can't do and what businesses can and can't do, like free enterprise in this country. We're a capitalist system, and that's always going to be a thing as far as I can tell, or at least through my lifetime. But like I said, don't overstep the boundaries to think that it's all socialism that we're critiquing, because it's really not the same thing. Comments on that?
Well, I think a lot of what you're getting to is socialism in this context a noun or an adjective?
Well, all right.
Is it something, it's a singular system like the Soviet system, or is it kind of a mixed economy that has some socialistic elements, some capitalistic elements?
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. The problem I had with it, the problem I had with his statement is that he didn't clarify. He just sort of branded everything as socialism, and therefore everybody goes, "Oh no, we can't have anything." Well, that's ridiculous. We'd have to get rid of a lot of services that we already enjoy. I was telling one of my students brought this up today, and I'm like, "Look, I know a lot of people that are against socialism, but they'll walk downtown and cash their Social Security check." Like, calm down.
What did y'all think about his, he had a couple statements where he said we can't hurt our roaring economy with useless wars or partisan investigations.
Yeah.
I wonder what he was talking about. Was wars just thrown in there just to, so it wouldn't just be about investigations? I know he's trying to get out of Syria, and then he's kind of had to walk that back some, but.
Right. I mean, there's something that he hasn't called for all along. He's been saying all along to end the witch hunt and whatnot. But thus far, his whole first 2 years have been constantly compared and mirrored against Nixon's. And ironically, that he, again, mirrors that. To have Nixon in his State of the Union address 2 years in to have called down, hey, stop this investigation, and now he's doing the exact same thing. And again, this is Congress's constitutional duty to investigate and provide that check on the executive branch. So it definitely misplaced, and even on the right side of the room, you looked at the faces, and you could see the cringe, even on the Republican side, like, oh, I wish you hadn't said that just then.
Yeah. Okay.
Just another throw in here. What do you think about his, what about the plan to get, or if there's a plan, to get us out of Afghanistan, finally? Do you think are we overstepping that, or do we need to, because what we're doing, and I've sort of talked about this a long time ago, in order for us to get out of Afghanistan, we're going to have to do like we did in the Vietnamese conflict, which is to actually negotiate with the people we've been fighting against. They're actually negotiating with the Taliban. How do you feel about that? Is that the right move? Do we need to just hand it over? Do we then allow them to take the country back over? Because that's pretty much what's going to happen.
Isn't it interesting that because Trump's doing this, things change, right? Democrats wouldn't be, I don't think, so outraged by some of this stuff had it been another president doing this. I mean, traditionally, Democrats, or at least recently, it's not like they're screaming to stay in the Middle East. You've got the Republican branch of like the Ron Pauls and non-interventionists, and then you have the Democrats that have been pushing for getting the troops back home. But it's interesting because Trump is the one doing it. Now the Democrats have a big problem with it. We're just leaving our allies out to dry. I think that's kind of interesting.
I mean, we saw that under President Obama's presidency. That was one of his big campaign points, was getting the troops home. And not doing that in the right way then helped to lead to some of the issues that made us bring troops back. And so you are going to have to negotiate. You can't just pull out. But at the same time, his point about it being endless wars and that you can't continue with this is perfectly valid. And so we do have to get out, and I think that negotiated strategy is going to be what it has to be.
Well, do you think that if we get out of a protracted war that does harm to our economy overall because we have so many people that are working for the military, including contractors? I mean, it's a job creator, right?
Military industrial complex.
Right. Who warned about that?
Yeah.
Wasn't that Eisenhower?
Eisenhower.
Yeah.
And general knows what he's talking about.
But now that we've done it, that's my point is, now that we've done it, how do you back off without creating economic backlash on us?
I don't know. I'm sure there's people that are paying a lot of money to figure that stuff out,
We're
right?
stuck.
Okay, well, I guess we won't solve it tonight, but we'll figure out how to get out of
Just
there
solved it
eventually.
right there. Keep fighting, America.
All right. Do we have another question? It doesn't have to be politics. Come on up.
All right. Watch out now.
All right. State your name for the record.
My name is Chase Hartzell, and my question is, besides Upton Sinclair's The Jungle, what would you consider to be the most influential publication of the progressive era?
Okay, so we're talking about, man, this is going to be knocking some specifics around when we talk about the progressive era, but the muckrakers and the journalists of the time.
Would you count in How the Other Half Lives? You and I just talked about that book.
Yeah, that's late. Was that 1893 or ish?
It's maybe not quite progressive era, but it's knocking on the door, right?
That's part of it. I think that's right up there.
Is it? Okay.
What do y'all think? Does anybody know? Have any input on this? This is, of course, we're talking about specifics now, and he's in my AP US class, so we're just covering this stuff. That's why it's not something we generally talk about. But let's just talk about the progressive era in general with Teddy Roosevelt, which laid some of the groundwork for what FDR is going to do with the New Deal. And Teddy Roosevelt generally didn't get hardly any credit for government intervention and stuff like that. But what do y'all think about what Teddy Roosevelt did as president, and how much did it actually change our country's direction, that kind of thing?
I mean, it's hard to kind of overstate his influence there. And to make another allusion to the present, there are a lot of things that the way TR did things is very much the way that Donald Trump is doing things. Like, this is the way that it's going to be because I said so, and I'm going to make these things happen whether the country or the world likes it or not. And we are just going to go and do these things. Everybody says the Chinese tariffs are a bad idea. I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to force them into a negotiation, and you know what? They're at the negotiating table. And when they're walking out of these meetings smiling as if they're making progress. And so those big world and blustering comments and kind of throwing America's weight around, it worked. And I think we're starting to see it work again.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about the presidents that pushed through policy, controlled the government through their sheer personality. Teddy Roosevelt might be unparalleled as far as just using his sheer bluster and personality and stump speeches to control public opinion and get public support for whatever he thought was best.
Well, and I think one of the great accomplishments of Teddy Roosevelt that a lot of people don't appreciate is there was no great crisis that called for obvious and immediate action. If you're president in 1941 and the Japanese have just attacked, you have this great moment where you can be great. Teddy Roosevelt didn't ever have a great crisis like that, but he was able to look at a country that was doing pretty well for the most part and still find ways to make the nation great and still make changes. I mean, one thing I always think about is the national park system. I think it's one of the greatest ideas we've ever had. And so, the fact that he was able to look at not obvious conflicts, not obvious tragedies, but able to step up and make a name for himself anyway, I think is one of his great accomplishments.
I think that might be his most important legacy. When it all's said and done,
Absolutely.
it's going to be conservation.
U.S. history teacher guys, was that extremely controversial when they nabbed up a whole lot of land and said, sorry, you can't explore this and you can't have mining resources there and you can't do, because that's part of what we're seeing now with the modern EPA, which is, being run by people who don't like the environment. The idea about opening up federally reserved lands because they said it was the opponents of that said it was a land grab, and you're keeping industry from being able to explore, and you're keeping the country weak because we don't have enough energy resources. I mean, was it controversial when it happened? Were people upset that the government took this land and said, sorry, you can't have that, we can't utilize that?
Well, the government had been taking land for decades, giving it to railroad companies, stuff like that. The conservation movement with the national parks had been going on with under John Muir and stuff like that.
Right.
The interesting part of this was the divide with some of the conservationists like John Muir that wants to leave this land completely alone, and others to use the land for energy and damming up rivers and, what's that, Hetch Hetchy Valley and all that. So we had kind of a divide in the conservation movement. But Teddy Roosevelt gets a lot of credit for sticking his neck out and stopping some of these private companies from dividing. I mean, they were thinking about blasting through the Grand Canyon. They were thinking about dividing a lot of this stuff up.
If he was alive in the political climate that we exist in today, would people have branded him as like an outlandish liberal who is stopping industry in its tracks and therefore, killing jobs and making America weaker? Do you think that would be the case?
I think it's really tough to put somebody like Teddy Roosevelt on the modern continuum of politics, because I don't think he fits neatly at all into really any ideology. The old joke I heard was Teddy Roosevelt wanted to protect animals so he could shoot them, which I think is actually a pretty good summation.
That probably is true.
He's also, he wanted, imperialism and war, yet he got the Nobel Peace Prize for arbitrating Russia and Japan. So
absolutely, yeah.
He's a walking complex figure. I mean, he's kind of like Jefferson in that way, I think.
And then a lot of those lands that are the initial parts of the Park Service, that's Western land that is still at that point mostly empty. And so there wasn't a whole lot of population there to be upset about it. If we contrast that with the oldest unit of the National Park System that we're almost sitting in right now, Hot Springs Reservation, which had nothing to do with Native Americans, but everything to do with it being reserved for public use. And,
right.
There is constant decades, 40, 50 years of legislation after Andrew Jackson sets aside Hot Springs Reservation with conflicting claims to the springs and to the territory. So it's those early parks like Yosemite, like Yellowstone, because they were still mostly empty, there wasn't a whole lot of controversy there.
Hey, and you said something about responding to a crisis. You know what's kind of been lucky for us is we haven't had a major crisis since Trump's been president. You kind of wonder what would happen if we had a major crisis happen. So either a huge terrorist attack, God forbid, or some sort of economic crash or something.
You mean the caravans don't count?
No, I wouldn't count those.
Well, I mean, they say that it's a crisis, right?
Right. But I mean, like real,
national emergency.
National emergency kind of. It's kind of been, I think, good. Let's just keep this going. No crisis.
Yeah.
All right. What else?
All right, we got people lined up.
All right, here we go.
Okay, so this is kind of a dried up conversation, but I still think it's interesting to talk about. So a couple of years ago, with the resurgence of far-right ideals, there's a rise of the Antifa movement or organization ideal, whatever you want to call it. And then in response to that, a lot of people started saying that Antifa are the real fascists and stuff like that. So what are your thoughts on that?
Anybody want to touch?
Repeat that because I couldn't.
Okay, so we had
catch it.
the emergence of the far right, and in reaction to that, you have the left that increased in its polarization, and we have the Antifa.
Okay.
Is it the new far? Did you say you think it?
Do you guys agree with the assessment that it's fascist in itself, or do you strongly disagree with that, or what are your thoughts on it?
That the anti-fascists are being fascists?
Well, there's evidence for that.
Yes.
To some degree.
All right, let me jump on that real quick. You being a sophomore, we're not too far away from studying this exact thing. So I'm sure there's an actual term for this, but the way I normally teach this is that if you go far enough on the polarized ends of a political spectrum, you end up with the same type of person. Whether you go the left direction or you go to the right, you end up with a dictatorial style of ideologies, and then which might lead to governance, which basically says you can't say things that we don't approve of. You can't march unless we've given you that approval. There may be censorship, and there may be there's a dictatorial type of policy that comes from that. So I mean, you're not too far away from the truth.
And they use similar tactics.
Right. Yeah.
And intimidation, and violence, and purges.
Exactly. So I mean, you're not. I think you're on the right track with that sort of thinking. You can go so far left that you come back to hard right, and even though they won't recognize each other, they'll vilify each other. They're actually going to try to do things the exact same way, which I think is interesting.
I think it's important to make a distinction between tactics, which certainly can kind of come around back full circle and be very similar,
Right.
versus ideology, which I don't think ever makes that loop. And something I like to point out to students is something can be really, really bad and not be fascist.
Well,
Like,
when I say
yeah.
the ideology aspect of that, maybe
Yeah.
I need to clarify just
Yeah.
the very exclusive ideas that we are right and no one else.
Oh,
will,
sure. Absolutely.
That's what
Yeah.
I'm talking about. Yeah.
Okay, very good.
Yep. Good.
Next.
Jordan Lyle. Could the United States have prevented the Holocaust?
Ooh. Now we're getting. Okay. Well, anybody?
No.
I mean, you've got to know about it before you can halt it. And it's not necessarily the way that we present the narrative now, but there are a lot of Eastern and Western European nations that are unwittingly participating in the Holocaust. That they're like shipping these people off and really don't understand what is going to be happening to them once they get to where they're going. And so,
What is
no.
the consensus on when the United States and maybe just FDR and Churchill knew about the Holocaust and made the choice to defeat Germany and not worry about that yet? Does anybody know? I've heard different things, that it was late. I've heard it's early as 41.
I've never seen anything that clearly marked when we knew. I mean, for certain at least. And maybe we didn't know for certain until we actually went into the camps and liberated them. I mean, that the extent of. I'm sure there were.
There was
I'm sure there was
evidence
knowledge
to
of labor camps, but the death camp is a different thing.
Right. And I do think that a lot of the evidence, the sparse bits that we received early on, it seemed so outlandish that nobody was actually ready to believe that this could really be happening. I think the same way that we think it's unimaginable today, they thought the same things.
Well, but we have precedent for that, though, with the Armenian genocide that happened, during World War I. And, I mean, they had concentration camps, and they had death camps, and they had crematoriums. So it's not like we weren't thinking that, that it couldn't happen. So, I mean, I wonder how far we went in our actual attempts to know. I mean, you can't infiltrate necessarily, the heart of Poland to see what's going on in some of these camps. But
Right.
at the same time, we had some information. But I don't know exactly
I know
when.
towards the end of the war, we're talking early 44, there was some concern that if we tried to blow up the rail lines, that the Germans would have just started massacring. They would have just cleaned house with the people that were there still alive. We would endanger the lives of the people there.
Would you guys agree that we could have, I don't want to say prevented, but we could have mitigated the effects of the Holocaust by allowing more Jewish refugees to come to our shores?
That definitely happened as well, where we
Yes.
turned.
Because we blocked people.
Yes.
So we're implicated to a degree in some of this, but it's kind of unclear as to when we knew. I think that really makes a difference. When did we know this was going on, and were there viable options to stopping it? But I think the consensus was between Churchill and FDR, who was kind of seeing ahead as we're going to help them best by taking care of Germany.
I'm curious if there's any research on that. Would those documents be declassified by this time? Who knew what and when?
I think it's really tough. Anytime you're dealing with intelligence history, you're always dealing with conflicting sources, conflicting information. So I think it's extremely rare that somebody comes to the president and says, this is exactly what's happening. And there's no question, and there's no conflict, and there's no confusion. This is exactly what is happening at this moment, at this time and place. I don't think that's usually how it works. I think the way it pretty much always works is, okay, here are some of the reports we're getting. This is what we think is happening with 70% confidence, but we're not sure, and I think that plays a big factor as well.
Yeah.
We went to Poland a couple years ago, and I just want to shout out on the trips that I take. If you get an opportunity to come with us, me and Franklin go sometimes. We're going to London and Paris. We're going to be at the beaches at Normandy, all that coming up. But going to Auschwitz, that's one of the highlights. It's one of those places you want to go, but you never really want to go back. But I think it's important to go one time and to really think about what happened there. And I think if people did that more often, we wouldn't repeat some of the worst parts of history.
Do you realize that we're going to be on the beaches of Normandy almost 75 years since D-Day? I mean, this is the 75th anniversary.
Wow. It's insane. I can't wait. Okay, next.
Grant Viscardis. I'm not sure if y'all know about this yet, or if it's true or not. But what is your opinion on the Hawaiian smoking age raised to 100?
I haven't heard about this, so.
I've actually heard about this. There's a bill that they're debating that would not outlaw use of tobacco, but it would prohibit the sale of tobacco to anyone under the age of 100 years old. Yeah,
Right.
I think the idea is, well, we can limit it to 18 or 19 or 21. We can limit it to 100. Tobacco's really bad. Smoking's really bad. Kills lots of people. This will be a good thing. It's a.
Does that also apply to vaping? Will it also apply to vaping then?
I'm not sure.
I haven't read the text of the bill,
Okay.
but that's a big important distinction too. Like, this is a bill. This is something that's being considered by their legislature, not something that even is particularly likely to pass at this juncture.
This brings up kind of an interesting side note that when you listen to campaigns coming up, you're going to hear a lot about immigration and the crisis, and you're going to hear a lot about maybe marijuana, and you're going to hear about some of this. Hundreds of thousands of people die from cigarette smoke and smoking. Nobody's going to talk about it. I wonder why they don't ever talk about those things that are killing more people than anything else.
Well, clearly they are in Hawaii, in fairness.
Clearly they are.
Right.
Maybe this is the beginning of people talking. Now, I'm not saying it should be the government's job to tell you not to smoke either, because that's a slippery slope too we could talk about. But just the fact that what kills the most Americans, whether it's heart disease or cancer and some of the things you can do to make those issues worse, aren't really ever talked about in politics.
Right. Although it was nice to hear, going back to the State of the Union, that we are finally going to devote a significant amount of funds and programs to the opioid crisis.
Yes.
So that we have recognized that, hey, the
What
pharmaceutical
was the number that
companies-
he gave? What was the significant? You said significant number. Like what?
And so there were already some programs in place, but they are adding new programs, and
I mean, did he give a dollar amount? I don't remember.
I don't remember either, to be honest. But just to even hear it paid lip service is nice.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of like the childhood cancer thing. We're going to donate how much? Hey, he said like what, 40 million or something like that.
500 million.
500 million. That
Over
sounds
10
impressive
years.
until you think about the 700 billion we spend on defense every year.
Yes.
Could we take 1 billion and give it to cancer research? I mean, can we take 1 billion away from the military at all and give it to something like childhood cancer? I don't know. Just a thought.
It's definitely possible, but it kind of goes back to your industrial, military complex,
Yeah.
in that the military budget that they have been handed the last couple of years has actually been more than the Joint Chiefs of Staff have asked for, and so there's clearly a much stronger drive for funding the military type projects than the military itself. So that's going to be a hard ask.
Hey, speaking of money, are we about to have another government shutdown?
Yes.
Hey, why don't they do this? I don't know that I've heard anybody say this, and maybe this is a common knowledge, but why don't they just appropriate the $5.6 billion that Trump wants for the wall? But we don't do it for the wall. We just do it in general and let the Border Patrol decide what to do with that money. Why don't both parties just come to a joint resolution that we're going to let the people down there decide what they do with the money? We're going to give it to them to appropriate how they see fit. Wouldn't that save face for both sides if they could do that? Or would Trump be worried they wouldn't build his wall?
I think that he would be worried about it is a big part of it. For whatever reason, he's decided that this is the hill that he's willing to die on, and that's going to be hard to step down from.
But it just seems like if he got in front of the cameras and said, look, I'm going to be the bigger man, which I know he's never done, but I'm going to give the money to the experts at the border, and we're going to let them decide what to do about our immigration at the border. And so I'm going to step back. It seems like even if they didn't build his wall, or they only used $1 billion of it for new fencing or whatever, it would be out of his hands. It wouldn't be a direct loss. He could gain a little, like, yeah, that's pretty good. He let the experts at the border decide. I know he won't do that, but
I think you run into a couple problems. First of all, just constitutionally, it's the House of Representatives and the president. They're the people who are supposed to be doing this budget. And so the point at which they just start, taking billions of dollars and giving it away, or not giving away, but allocating it to people who haven't been elected, I think there's some real potential problems there. Another thing is, I wouldn't want somebody to give me that kind of money and then say, oh, by the way, no pressure or anything, but
Oh, yeah, that's true.
I think that puts them in a very difficult position. So it's an interesting idea, the practicalities
Are you
of
afraid
it.
that we'll end up with a $500 billion Lego wall?
All right, well, let's go down the line. Yes or no, shut down on the 15th.
I'm saying probably, yeah.
What, do you have a opinion?
I'm going to be the eternal optimist, and I'm going to say that there will be a resolution, and I'm going to say there will not be a shutdown. I'm going to be an optimist.
Very good.
So I'm going to say there's going to be a shutdown, but it's going to be a relatively small one, because what Trump is facing here is there's such a political will to prevent another one that if it goes to it, because he won't sign it, he really risks forcing a split in the party with them being forced to override his veto.
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be another shutdown. I think Trump learned his lesson after that last one.
Wait a minute, whoa. Say those words again?
I think there'll probably be another shutdown because Trump never learns his lesson. But it was the first time where he's caved. I mean, you can say what you want, but he didn't get his money, and he opened up the government. He could have done it 30 days previously, but he decided to wait 30 days, make people suffer, and then he caved anyway and did it. I just don't know how he can go down that same exact road and not lose a bunch of support.
I think you underestimate his obstinance.
Oh, I like that phrase. You underestimate his obstinance. Okay, next question.
Hey, I'm Ethan Garner. All right, me and a lot of my buddies have been putting together a band. I know a lot of you guys are musicians, and we've gotten to the point over time that we feel very confident in our music ability and we're ready to get ourselves out in public. What do you think is the best course of action to do that? I mean, how'd you guys do it?
Well, when I started a band, if you wanted to make it, it depends on what you want. If you just want to gig around and have fun and do it as a hobby, that's what you do. You just start playing places. Probably have to play free for a while, and then eventually you'll get good enough where people hire you to play covers, things. Now, if you want to make it, well, you have an opportunity that I never had, which is you can put your stuff online and see what happens.
Self-publishing is the new.
Yeah, you don't have to move to, like when I started at 18, or I was playing drums at 12. But when I started thinking about doing it for a living, I had to move. I was going to have to go to Dallas, New York, L.A., Austin, some music, Nashville, and I just didn't have it in me. But I wanted to set up my life where I had a career like this, but I could do it on the weekends. So it depends on how you want to do it. I definitely would say record yourselves constantly, edit, put your stuff out there, let people see it, share, and be willing to play for free for a while. And then the more it's just like anything, the more you do it, the better you get, and more comfortable you get.
I'm going to suggest that you do a cover version of Baby Shark, and the whole nation will go crazy for you, and you'll be a household name in no time.
Yeah. Hey, no problem. All right, next question.
Everybody knows that
State
song.
your name for the record.
My name is PJ Weston, and I want to ask what you guys thought of this most recent Super Bowl. If it was boring or exciting because of defense.
Okay, so what did y'all think of the Super Bowl? Boring or exciting?
I think there wasn't a Super Bowl. The right team didn't get to play.
Oh. Wah, 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 wah. Yep. Okay, I am a old football coach, so I didn't mind the defensive battle. I didn't mind seeing the punting frenzy that occurred.
Do you know? Hey,
but I get it why an average fan would think it's boring because they're obsessed with touchdowns.
I'm not advocating following Vegas betting lines and things like that, but the over/under on that game was 56, which means that the guys who set the standard for what they think the game is going to do, they were predicting 8 touchdowns in that game, which was, I don't know where they came up with that number. It was obviously going to be a defensive struggle. Both those teams, in the playoffs leading up to it, there were low scores, man. And so, but yeah, 3-0 at halftime really didn't surprise me.
Yeah.
Or whatever it was. It was low, right?
To me, I was okay with it, but I can understand why people thought it was boring. I wasn't a big fan of the halftime show, though, and I really liked Maroon 5. If you go back and watch that, he was kind of pitchy. Like, he wasn't right on. He didn't seem like he had the fire in him to really play.
Pitchy?
Pitchy with the P.
Okay.
He was a little off. He was a little out of breath. Maybe
okay.
he was under the weather.
Now I get it.
And then they had what's the first rapper's name? Oh, wow.
The best rapper.
How long has he been around? Is he kind of new, though? Well, they had Big Boy from Outkast, which is back when I was around. Ready for action, dip it in the bow.
I don't know. I mean, it wasn't action-packed, but in its own way. I thought it was okay. I didn't dislike the game.
I've also noticed a decline in the commercial quality. It didn't seem like the commercials are as they used to be. Like 10 years ago, I thought
Are the commercials
maybe we're getting used
not
to
as,
it.
or maybe I'm just older and more critical. I don't know.
Cranky.
Yeah, cranky. That wasn't funny. I mean, I heard myself.
That isn't
You know how much
music.
money they spent on that commercial? $10 million for a minute of that's dumb. That was not a good commercial. I mean, they were kind of stupid in my opinion.
What's that Bill Burr line? Back when I was a kid, you dressed like a girl and you sang about the devil. Now
That
that's
was music.
All right. I don't know why we're talking about that. Next question.
What are you guys' thoughts on the United States and some other countries recognizing Juan Guaido as the new president of Venezuela?
Yeah, this is anybody want to take that one?
Okay. I mean, I've got thoughts, but I'll let other people jump in. I don't want to.
No, you go ahead.
Yeah,
you go
yeah,
ahead.
You go ahead. Yeah,
Take this one.
after you.
Not a big topic. The question was, what do we think about that? What do we think about his attempt to take over the government? What do we think about our response to his attempt to take over the government? Like, what are you asking? Yeah. All right. So, if you're not familiar with what's happening in Venezuela, the guy who's the current president, well, other people are challenging them, but a guy named Maduro came into office several years ago, 6, I guess now, as a political reformer, a guy who was a working class guy, and he came in as basically a savior, and people believed that he was going to create new jobs. It was going to be this wonderful thing. Well, the thing that was kind of helping him was that their main commodity, which is oil was $100 a barrel when he took office, and there's lots of money flowing into that country. When oil prices dropped to $50 a barrel and below, it cut their economy in half, and the social programming that he put in place fell apart. So they have nothing to back it up with, and so it's really gone sour since then. Massive shortages, food shortages, people starving, people leaving the country, upheavals, and there's been protests against him specifically and his policies for going on 2 years. Now this latest round of elections, he claimed to have won handily, and other people are challenging. This guy, Juan Guaido, says, no, I'm the leader of the National Assembly, and I should be the president because this is a crisis and you're not really the guy. That's their business. They need to get that figured out. But my problem with the whole thing is that we're threatening to intervene. We made a comment that we support the guy who's not been elected president, which seems like we're undermining elections. Several countries joined in after us. Canada, the UK, several European countries followed suit. And then the opposing team, basically now, who supports the guy who's in the presidency, Maduro, is like Mexico and Russia and Cuba, and I forget who else, Turkey, I think, joined in on their side. So, like, we're setting ourselves up for some sort of proxy event that smells a whole lot like Cold War actions, and having been someone who lived through all that and paid attention to it at the time, like, that doesn't feel right. The idea about threatening military intervention there, boots on the ground, like, can we stumble into another conflict, especially in Latin America, where we've had a mixed history at best? I don't know. Like, I don't foresee it going well, though, no matter what we do.
It's another legacy of Teddy Roosevelt, by the way.
Yeah, right.
Oh, yeah.
Police power in Latin America.
Yeah, helped along by Monroe's doctrine, but you know. So the real issues that I have with what's happening in Venezuela is very much from a base level social contract, constitutional principles aspect. Not only is this person who has now declared himself president and that we apparently support, was he not elected, he didn't even run. But now, because the United States and some other Western nations say so, he has gotten the legislature to say, okay, for 30 days you get to pretend to be president. Let's flip this. Let's imagine this is happening in the United States, and pick your political figure or pop culture icon du jour that didn't run and has now declared themselves president and gotten a lot of other nations to agree with them. A very, very small segment of the population is going to be okay with this situation. This is not a good thing. Now, unfortunately, either way it goes, this is not going to be a good thing.
Agreed.
Yeah.
All right.
But just one more item on that. I saw, I guess it was either late yesterday or early this morning, this Guaido person, because there's been so many protests and things in the capital city of Caracas, actually was able to gather humanitarian aid, food resources, and medical things that they might need in the city, and Maduro blocked it. They actually put military on a bridge to block them coming into the city. So there's, I mean, everything's amping up here. And again, I just don't want to see us. I don't like the idea that we're possibly helping to undermine a situation that's already bad.
Right.
We'll see where it goes.
All right, next question.
It's Chase again, and my next question is Rolling Stones or Beatles?
Beatles.
Beatles.
Rolling Stones.
Oh.
The curmudgeon. Yeah,
I've
but you're a Rolling
got
Stone guy.
one word for you when it comes to Rolling Stones. Altamont.
Oh, really?
Really. I said Altamont. I did. You heard me.
Wow.
Right.
I don't know. Are you really going to blame them for that?
Now,
Yes.
Just because they hired Hell's Angels to work security doesn't mean it's their responsibility to, when somebody
Yeah,
gets
keep
stabbed.
talking. Go ahead. Keep going. Keep going.
Right.
Uh,
I mean, now if I'm talking about
wow.
who I want to see, like if I can hop in a time machine, I want to go watch the Rolling Stones. But if you're talking about influence and depth and quality and range of music, you got to give it to the Beatles.
I don't have to do anything.
Well,
All right.
Apparently, you can't get no satisfaction.
It's terrible.
No, it's right on the money.
Yeah, I've actually never been a big Stones fan, but now watching them still going, I really respect just the amount of. I mean, they're still going.
It's better living through chemistry, sir.
I mean, if anybody in history should have left their body to science, it's got to be Keith Richards.
Wait,
Mm-hmm.
he's not dead yet.
If he doesn't do that, he's.
Can't leave your body to science if you haven't died yet.
How has he not died yet?
Well, they
like,
give him a blood
10 years
transfusion
ago, he was in
before
his
every
70s, climbing a coconut tree, fell off, and landed on his head.
No, I mean,
And he's
I give you that. The dude should have died decades ago. I mean, he's just still going.
he's got to
it's
leave his body to
impressive.
science. We have to study this.
Longevity. That's another reason why the Stones are better than the Beatles.
He wrote a book. And
Now, that's not Lennon's fault. Okay.
have you read Richard's autobiography?
Who?
Keith Richards.
Oh, no.
He talked about doing all the drugs. When people
Doing
were
all the drugs. He did
doing
all the
all
drugs.
the drugs.
There were
But he
no
said
drugs left in the 60s
what made
and
him
70s. He did them
different
all.
was he paced himself. He just did a little, and then wait a while, and then just did a little more. And while everybody else was passed out,
Build
he
up
just
some
gotta-
immunity over time.
Yeah, you just got to build it up.
Moderation is the key.
Moderation. Aristotle had it right all along.
It's the golden rule.
All right. Do we have anybody else? You want to ask a question?
That's not the golden rule. I just want to go on record. I just want to clarify that.
Jordan Lyle, what's your opinion on the NFL not playing Sweet Victory at the Super Bowl?
Not playing Sweet Victory at the Super Bowl.
All right, so background. Not that I don't think anybody in the audience needs it, but from SpongeBob SquarePants, right? There's this great epic episode where he sings this song and it's just transformative, and the NFL constantly hints that they're going to get Maroon 5 to sing it and play it and make it a part of the halftime show, and even start the halftime show with some SpongeBob footage, and then it doesn't happen. This is the most brilliant marketing move that the NFL has made in 20 years. They got a entire subculture of Redditors and 4chan and all that stuff to watch and to see all the commercials and to get all that airtime, and they didn't actually have to pay the royalties for the song. Like, that was a brilliant move.
Yeah, that's a one-time thing. Let's do that this time. Make some money. Yeah, I agree.
So it was a bait and switch?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, probably.
All right. Any other questions?
Oh, no, you jump up there.
State your name for the record.
My name is Michaela Davis. I was curious if you thought the band Queen would ever die, like their music would ever get old, even with new generations.
Well, the movie certainly has helped, as movies do sometimes, but Queen's music is unique, and it's also seems like all their songs were epic, and they were super, super, super talented. I mean, this is a once in a generation band anyway, so I can see why their music has some staying power. Freddie Mercury was one of a kind, not just vocally, but being able to hold 100,000 people in the palm of his hand.
Yeah.
He might be is he the greatest frontman of a band ever, or who do we go with?
Oh man, I don't know. That's
Greatest frontman in a band, Axl Rose. Let's just go down the line here. You got to be in a band, so it can't be a solo artist.
It might be Freddie Mercury, like that, because I've seen some of the concert footage, and you're talking about the time they played Wembley Stadium. What? How many like over 100,000 people in that event?
Right.
And he just had them on their edge of their seats the whole time. Maybe.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna have to say I don't like Queen. I really don't like Queen. I've never liked Queen. I'll acknowledge there's talent there. Go ahead. It just makes me stronger. Go ahead. Hate me. That's fine. I love that. No, I think certainly Freddie Mercury had a lot of talent, but I think a lot of what was happening with Queen was it was uniqueness for the sake of uniqueness, as opposed to having a unique artistic vision and then convincing people that it's worth listening to.
Is this still a Beatles argument that you're making?
It is a Beatles argument. All arguments return to the Beatles. Haven't you learned this by now? No. I respect the talent, but I think it was more marketing talent than unique artistic vision talent. But
Wow.
I don't know. I think they do some things on the recording side that are fairly unique. Now, there are Queen songs that I would like to die. Anybody who's ever listened to Bicycle never wants to listen to it ever again.
Are you kidding?
If that's your favorite song, you're wrong.
Shots fired. Yeah, I don't know what to say. I wasn't I'm a little young, so I kind of miss Queen in their heyday, but obviously they have some anthems that might not ever go away, whether you like them or not. They might be around.
I mean, interestingly, I want to throw this argument out there that they did almost die, that you've actually got Mike Myers and Wayne's World that saves it. Nobody
That's
was
true.
playing Bohemian Rhapsody until that happened in the mid-'90s?
Look, you're making absolute statements that you can't back up.
oh,
Nobody was listening to Bohemian Rhapsody.
Well, okay, not nobody. You're absolutely right. That was maybe too far.
I will say that gave Bohemian Rhapsody to the next generation.
Yes.
And this movie has now given it to another generation.
Yeah, no, they breathed new life into it. I agree with that.
Yeah.
So.
Because I remember, I mean, this was a long time ago, but I remember hearing Bohemian Rhapsody for the first time from Wayne's World.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know Queen did that. I didn't know much about Queen at all.
That's because you're a youngster, sir.
I'm just in that weird age. I'm not young, but I'm not as old as Franklin over there.
That's
decrepit.
true. That's true. You're not. Therefore, I'm wiser.
That makes a difference too. That 10 years or 8 years or 9,
yeah.
7, whatever it is. All right. What else?
All
Anybody
right.
else? All right.
People in line.
State your name for the record.
My name is Jack Schlatter, and I have a question about the 2020 presidential race. So, former Starbucks CEO Howard Schultz is considering an independent run for the presidency. He's trying to run as a centrist. Do you think that he has a chance, and do you think that he'll have a spoiler effect that many speculate he could have?
Yeah, the Starbucks guy's running, and many people are scared it's going to split the Democratic vote and allow Trump to just get re-election. What do y'all think about his run or what he's trying to do as does a centrist have a chance in this election?
Why does he even think that? I mean, does he have a platform? Does he have anything that he's advocating? Does he have? I mean, or is he just like, hey, I'm another rich guy. You hired a rich guy, so maybe you'll hire me. I mean, is that his plan?
I think he's trying to play the balance between the conservatives and the liberals. I think he wants to maybe find a middle ground. He's probably hoping that Hillary will run again or Biden.
All right, this is a question for you then. What do you have to do to be a third-party candidate and get actually on the presidential ballot? Like, what do you have? You have to. Is there like? There's no primary for you, is there? Or how does that work?
No, but you got to poll a certain percentage.
Polling.
And the Democratic and Republican parties changed all this after Perot did his thing and got Clinton elected, because he didn't. I forgot what his overall polling was, but it was like 13%, and I think they've raised it a little bit. And apparently,
Is that you mean like a compendium of national polls? or
yeah,
how
I
does
think it's
that
kind
work?
of an average of what percentage
Okay.
to get on. And from what I've heard Romney say this. I've heard tons of people say this. If you're not part of the presidential debates, it's over. You're done. Like, that's how important those debates are. I don't know if that's still the case with social media and all the.
Honestly, Jack, I don't know that he's got a shot at even being on the platform.
Well, and I think it's really important just from a structural standpoint to note, we do not have a single presidential election. We have 50 elections that take place on the same time. Every single state sets their own rules, their own standards for how you get on the ballot, what you have to do, and those are all constantly changing and undoubtedly will continue to change and evolve. So you could very easily be on the ballot in some states and not others. And then you get into questions about if you're running as an independent, do you have a national organization that can jump through all the hoops in each of the 50 states? Can you do it in enough states to make you viable? I mean, those are the kind of nuts and bolts questions you get into with somebody like an independent. And that's where a Republican or a Democrat has such a huge advantage, is because they already have an existing organization in every single state that will do whatever they need to do to make sure that you are on the ballot and to make sure that you have people knocking on doors and saying your name.
So you're saying he doesn't have a bureaucracy underneath him?
I mean, unless.
Okay, well, another question.
Not that he certainly doesn't have a party.
The guy's a billionaire, right? But how much like usable cash does he have on hand? I wonder.
No. Couldn't begin to guess.
Yeah, that would make a difference too, maybe.
And it's not just a question of money. Certainly, money's important in politics, but there's a lot to be said for having people who have kind of bought into whichever political party it is and are going to support that party and are going to do the nuts and bolts kind of things you have to do to make a presidential campaign. I mean, you can hire people all day, but if you don't have that organization that's been baked into the culture going back 50 or 100 years, that just, I think, puts you in a real tough spot, for better or for worse.
Are the Democrats going to cannibalize themselves in the primary? Are there going to be 25 of them running?
I mean,
there's already 15.
Right, it's looking that way now. But for Schultz, I think the big difference here is that he doesn't have the star power. I mean, the whole billionaire thing worked for Donald Trump, not just because he got the party behind him and won the primary, but because people cared who he was. Nobody cares who Schultz is. And so
I didn't know he existed until he came out.
Right, and so with that, you're not going to see him play as large a role. At best, I think he might hope to push his party, the Democratic Party, further to the center, and I think there's real value in that. I mean, Nixon's great silent majority holds true even to today, that the majority of voices we don't hear because they aren't as passionate as the voices that you'll find on the fringe. The question about whether the Democrats are going to cannibalize themselves, though, I think we're starting to see that a little bit already with Elizabeth Warren's run, and that you've got fellow Democrats attacking her for her Native American claims.
Can we just go ahead and agree that being a billionaire does not automatically give you the political acumen to be able to get the presidency and to be able to handle that job and do it well? Like, just because you have made $1 billion, like, as far as I can tell, Starbucks was an accident. Like, this wasn't like massive creative marketing campaigns that he strategized. I mean, he had a group of people that helped him with this once they got past a certain point. But it doesn't take a super genius. It just sort of takes luck. And so, but that, just because you've made it good in one business doesn't mean that you can be the person who can be the leader of the free world. Oh my God, when are we going to get past this star power? It's asinine. Well, we need somebody who actually knows the job, has been in it, and can work through the system, because that's why the system is there. It's important to work through the system.
I agree with you, but it also takes $1 billion to be president. You've got to spend that much.
Not your own.
No, not your own. But the problem is somebody like you or me, I want to be president. I mean, the uphill battle, it's impossible.
If you've worked your way in through local politics, and then you've come up through state politics, and then you've gotten some notoriety that way. Let's say, like, let's use Tom Cotton, for example.
Quickly.
But I mean, it's that. Then all of a sudden, you've got some backing, but you can't just jump in, I think, and go, well, I think I've got a couple of good ideas. I wouldn't. I mean, I feel like I'm fairly intelligent, but I wouldn't make a good president.
Yeah, I think something has to give with the campaign finance system that we currently have. Yeah. I just don't think this can keep going forever with how much money you have to raise and campaigning for a year and a half. I'm so sick of it. Good grief. Just pick somebody.
But I mean, what we're looking at with campaign finance, though, is we're almost to the point where it will take a constitutional amendment to try to fix it. I mean, because the case law that is behind and First Amendment law that is behind with the recent rulings from the Supreme Court,
Yep.
Citizens United, not even the largest necessarily among them, that simple legislation is going to be hard to try to fix that and it not be immediately struck down again.
Hey, what do you think about the? They posed the question to, I guess it was Mitch McConnell the other day. Would he support the idea of making Election Day a national holiday? And his retort was basically, well, that would be a power grab for the Democrats, and so therefore we wouldn't support that. Like, what do you think about that? Is he right?
Why would he say that? Is he saying that because he thinks that?
Well, because more people would vote, and if more people vote, he's afraid that those boys would be out of business. I mean, is that? What do you think about that?
I'm not sure that more people would vote.
You don't think they would if it was a national holiday?
I'm not sure that they would. I think that the people that were already going to vote would not let something at work stop them then.
Yeah.
But, because we have President's Day, we don't spend the day celebrating our president.
I think the idea is that the people who were going to vote now, because they may have the whole day, can like rally up and you know what, I'll drive 3 or 4 of you down there with me. Or the idea that you could help other people who might not be able to go on their own more effectively, I think, is part of the fear.
Why can't we vote online? I mean, we can bank online, but we have to physically go. Can they not figure a system? I mean, it's like, well, people can hack our elections. Well, yeah, they could, and they still do.
are already right. I think it's just the security aspect of it.
I'm sure it is.
And how do you verify that person is that person and isn't voting for somebody else? Which is the big push now against absentee voting. Is that a legitimate ballot, or is somebody ordering one for their grandmother who has dementia and voting twice with the absentee ballot? We're starting to see that kind of criticism. Those very well could go away within the next decade. We'll have to see how that.
Yeah, it seems like things might change a lot in this next decade as far as how we vote, especially if we still get interference and stuff. Okay, next question.
My name's Kayla Stroopy. So earlier today, Mr. Franklin and I were talking about the first podcast and how much it's grown. So that brought me to thinking, why did y'all choose Kollective to start your podcast here, live?
2 words. Abby Hanks.
Yeah, Abby asked whenever it was last year sometime if we'd be interested in doing this on the road. And I was like, what? I didn't even know what that meant. I didn't envision this coming out and having students show up and us doing this. But then we were able to book it. And I thought we would add music to maybe help get people out here. And then I could hold people hostage with my participation points. And that's all I remember, really. We decided to do it once a month.
Yeah, we thought we'd try it, and bingo, it worked. I mean, it's been a pretty cool thing. And it seems like it's bigger every time we do it, too, so that's pretty fun.
Yep. It's kind of interesting to do this outside of school, too. The whole podcast started with just me and Franklin, chatting in the hallway.
Right.
I never thought, we took it on the road to Italy last year. We did, just like we're doing now, we did that just chilling at the hotel.
Hey, did I tell you
we're going to do that again this year.
My wife was nice enough to get me a 360 camera for Christmas, and we're going to take it with us on the road when we go to London and Paris. And we might be able to do a live thing where people could come in and see they could access the camera and they could sort of look around where we are. That'd be kind of cool.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
It's just going to get bigger.
So if you can't go on the trip, you could still maybe tune in. That'd be kind of cool.
Oh yeah, we'll have a virtual tour. All right. I've got several questions that people kind of submitted. What about the electoral college system? There was a big push after Trump was elected that we should go to just a popular vote. What is the argument for and against? And will the argument for the popular vote, just the one national election, get stronger as we move forward?
Was it you that was saying that it would be better in the long run if we did some sort of instead of winner take all in states, if we're going to keep the electoral system, that we actually did some, what's the word I'm looking for?
Appropriate by percentage.
Yeah, right. Did we do a percentage? You get so many of the electors, and you get so many depending on how
some
the state
states do
voted.
that. So I mean, that's something we could all. I don't know how that would be mandated.
Each state would kind of have to decide, or is that or who makes that decision? I don't even know.
That's an each state decision.
Is it? Okay.
Yep.
They've even talked about doing that or doing rank voting, where you rank your candidates 1 through 3 and then add the points.
Right, and Maine is doing that already. In fact, I think they had to decide an election this time based off that ranking system for the first time.
You are correct. It ended up in court, and I believe that was upheld as a valid mechanism.
Who did that? What state?
Maine.
Maine. Okay.
Was it the governor or the what election was it? I can't remember.
I don't remember.
I can't remember. It was a big election. It was a big statewide office. I know that.
Right. Well, so I'll take the less savory position, I think, and argue against getting rid of the Electoral College, because if we go to a pure popular vote system, you are giving tremendous power to relatively small areas of the country. You've got these major cities that have a real disconnect for what life is like for everybody else who isn't in their city, because so many people that live in places like Philadelphia or New York or LA are born there and die there and never even leave the city. And so if you essentially you're turning over all of the federal power to, or electoral power, executive power, find the right E word in a second, executive power to those major cities, and that's not a good way to go. Not that the Electoral College system is perfect. I do think that the best solution is kind of proportioning out those Electoral College votes.
Yeah.
I think that's the best that we could hope for.
Any other differences of opinion on that?
Well, I'll say this. I always think about probably my favorite historian of all time, Shelby Foote. And he says, Americans like to think of themselves as being uncompromising. We love to have this idea that we're very winner take all. But he says our real genius is for compromise. Our whole system is founded on it. It's the only reason our system works. And so I think I think everybody needs to acknowledge we're looking for a compromise between an extreme on either end of this question, and I don't know what the answer is, but I think acknowledging we're looking for a compromise and we need to find a way to balance those competing interests, not shift it all to one way or the other, I think is a really good philosophical starting point.
Wouldn't it also solve the whole dilemma of them saying, well, they stole the election? I mean, that kind of... There's so many... in the number of elections I've seen, that's probably 4 or 5 times I've heard that in my life. They stole it from us. Well, if you have some sort of appropriation, then the percentages matter and the popular vote matters. That seems to tone that argument down a little bit at least.
Yeah.
I think that somebody wants to argue about a stolen election will find a way to make that argument. I think there's always a way to, there's claims of some other malfeasance, I don't know. But I love your optimism, but I don't really share it.
Well, I'm hopeful.
Okay, we have one more question.
My name's Caitlin Wynn, and today in class you mentioned that the gap between the rich and the poor is getting bigger. So how do you think the U.S. would change that?
Yeah, we talked about, so we're going through the progressive era and what Teddy Roosevelt, some steps he did to start kind of regulating trust, because I think Teddy Roosevelt, as much as he uses bluster in his personality, he was a student of history. He understands that the widening gap between the rich and the poor can end in disaster when you have massive, poverty for most people, and then you have the rich at the very top. And so he started doing some things. Well, I saw a study not long ago that talked about we're on that exact same course, and we have been really since the 80s, slowly, where the rich are getting richer, the wages are stagnant, and if we keep this going for the next 20, 30 years, it could be really, really bad. What are appropriate steps that could be taken by our federal government, or should there be? Because a lot of conservatives think that's the problem.
We're watching and have been for the last 20 years the market not correct itself, which is of course always the conservative argument that you don't regulate it and the market forces will make everything work out eventually, even if that means things are unequal or not great for everybody for a little while. Clearly that's not happening. I think the United States is not prepared to countenance any kind of redistribution of wealth. And I think that kind of idea is really more of what President Trump's statement about socialism was pointed at in his statements.
Let me interrupt you just really quickly, because there is a distribution of wealth that just happens to go to the top.
Sure, and that's a distribution that the top is able to control because they control the company.
But you're right. We're okay with a certain amount of distribution, just not in the direction that it's, Like, we're not going to shift gears and go the other direction. Oh, my God, that's something we can't do. But we can definitely take from the middle class and shove it to the top of the system.
Well, right. I don't think that anybody, or at least most people in the country, would be comfortable with the government assuming that new authority to do that.
I don't think most people understand how it works, though. Right?
Well,
Otherwise, they'd
yeah.
be livid, maybe.
Right. But I think that the idea that currently seems to be on the table, and that I think has as good a chance as any, is the idea of going back to that kind of 1950s, 60s, 70s, 70% marginal tax bracket rate. And if you do that, then that helps to kind of penalize those super high-end earners, and that de-incentivizes constantly making sure that I'm getting the biggest possible paycheck. It kind of reduces the keeping up with the Joneses effect. I think that's got the better chance of anything that's currently being talked about.
Not if you listen to the president calling out socialism, because that's exactly the type of mentality that he's attacking.
What? Right. And I mean, that's true. I don't think that 70% tax bracket is anything that's likely to happen in this Congress or the next. But
you've got people like Ocasio-Cortez who are suggesting that very thing. And like I said,
yeah.
he's laying the groundwork to shoot all of that down. He's pulling the rug out of them before they can even make a stand.
I think what we're seeing, though, is that we are seeing the majority of the American people get behind that idea, however. And so there's a
But
a
are
great
they
clip if you
influential
find
enough to get it changed? So that's the point. Do you have enough lobbying power as individual citizens to make a difference in a legislator's mind so that they will actually put legislation forward that would make that actual change? As long as it's being controlled by the top corporate earners and the top income wage earners in this country, like, there's no chance that that's ever going to take place. Even if the majority of Americans want that, until you get other people on your side that actually have the money and control those votes, then it's just a pipe dream.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we might be starting to see that kind of shift, though. There was a Fox News poll, of all things, that asked that very question, and they had over 60% of the respondents say yes, that they would be willing to support the 70% tax bracket rate. And then you watched live television, the Fox pundits have to try to deal with that information. And it was remarkable how much they were trying to twist themselves up.
You know what else undermines that? You know what else undermines that ideology, even if people did support that? Single issue voters. Because you'll get someone who takes whatever stand they have, and they'll say, well, maybe the majority of Americans want that kind of thing. But they'll have a politician who is against those very things that are better for the bulk of the American people, but they have a singular issue that these people just can't vote against, whether it's a anti-abortion or that kind of thing. Like, singular issues like that are helping to crush progressivism in this country.
Isn't that kind of been the theme for the last 30 years, as many of the lower classes vote against their own economic interests constantly because of a single issue or two? It seems like that's been the case. I don't know how many times we're going to try trickle-down economics before we realize that doesn't work. I thought after the mortgage meltdown in 2006, and we had to bail out all these companies, and the CEOs still got their bonuses, I thought, okay, well, I don't know what to do now.
It didn't change after the late 80s meltdown. I mean, nope. we shifted gears just a teeny bit, but then we went right back to the way it was. It's just, we don't learn our own lessons. You get a new generation that comes right around and goes, well, we forgot about those problems. Those guys lived through it. We can too. And we just go right back to the same stupid politics and the same economic policies that brought us to ruin, into multiple recessions. We're just going to follow that same pattern. Again, I'm not doom and gloom, but the same bastards are making the same decisions, and so therefore we're going to get the same thing we've always had. Round and round. That's my opinion.
Well, let's storm the Bastille and get a tennis court oath, and let's get this thing rolling.
That's an interesting comparison. I was listening to some French commentators just the other day saying that, like, we're rioting in the streets because we don't think we're being paid enough, and you guys have missed 2 paychecks, and there's not a single riot. Like, how complicit are you Americans? And that was a really interesting point of view.
Yeah, that is.
I feel like things have taken a very dark turn here at the end. I just want to come out against storming any Bastilles, just me personally. Like,
we need to lighten the mood. What was your favorite Christmas present, everybody? Let's go. Oh, goodness. Okay, well, that concludes another episode of History After Hours. I want to thank Collective Coffee for having us out once again. Thank you, students, for showing up and asking some great questions. And we will see you the first Thursday of March. Thank you very much.